Good morning, everybody. I'm going to hand over to Oliver to do a little bit of a welcome, and we'll get going.
Hi, everyone. First of all, just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm sure, like most of us, you're maybe getting a little bit sick of Zoom and video conferencing. But I think we've all embraced this as being an easy way to get to know people still and engage with each other. So I really appreciate the time in coming to see us today. And hopefully the next 4 hours will go really smoothly. 30 minutes will go really smoothly. And you'll all enjoy the time that you've spent with us. We've got a really good presentation today from Sue. I've listened to many presentations from Sue over the years, and she's a really good speaker, and she's got some really good content for us today, so I'm hoping you'll enjoy that. And we're going to start off with a video that explains a little bit about us and a bit about our companies. You probably know that there are 3 separate independent brands that I have the privilege of representing. So we've got a little video which just explains a little bit about our history and how we all work together now. So hopefully you'll enjoy watching that.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our first virtual hearing event. My name is Oliver Wright, and I'm the Managing Director at DigiClear Hearing, County Hearing Care, and the Hearing Care Centre in Colchester. My time in the hearing care industry began in 1995 when I joined my father's business, DigiClear Hearing, straight from school. I qualified as a trainee hearing aid dispenser in 1997, and in doing so became one of the youngest people to have done this. Over the years, I've learned a lot about the impact that hearing loss can have on people, relationships and their quality of life. Seeing firsthand the change in a client before and after treating their hearing loss is always quite remarkable and definitely the most rewarding part of my job. I've also had the pleasure of seeing some fantastic improvements in hearing technology over the years. This includes invisible hearing aids, better sound quality, connectivity options, and rechargeable devices. Between the 3 companies, we have over 70 years of combined experience in providing great quality hearing care for clients across Essex, Hertfordshire, and London. DigiClear Hearing started life as the Hornchurch Hearing Aid Centre back in the 90s, working from the Wright family home in Hornchurch. After I qualified, we opened a second clinic in Chingford in the year 2000. This is when the brand name DigiClear and the limited company were formed. Since then, we've grown from a father and son team to a team of 13 people, including 5 audiologists, and we've also opened a clinic in Bishop Stortford. County Hearing Care was founded in 1997 by Roger Halliday. It merged with DigiClear Hearing in 2018, and working alongside the Hornchurch practice continues to provide great hearing care in Brentwood. The Hearing Care Centre in Colchester began life in 1998 with Vicky Skills as the founder. Over the years, the company has grown to have 3 audiologists, 1 ENT nurse and 4 front of house team. As well as its main Colchester branch in the town centre, we have satellite clinics at the Oaks Hospital, Manningtree, Tiptree and West Mersey. The Hearing Care Centre in Colchester continues to be seen as one of the leading independent clinics in the country and is viewed as a centre of excellence within our industry. The Hearing Care Centre merged to become sister companies to DigiClear and County Hearing in 2019. Across all of our clinics, we pride ourselves on treating each client like family. So whether you're here for a checkup, hearing aid fitting, tinnitus management or earwax removal, we promise the best hearing care from our experienced and friendly audiologists. Providing this level of care is so important to us because it helps us achieve our shared goal, which is to ensure that our clients never miss a moment due to hearing problems. From the big events with family and friends to the little everyday moments, it's our job to help you enjoy life without worrying about your hearing. We are also proud to partner with a variety of brilliant hearing aid manufacturers. This means that when it comes to choosing your hearing aids, there are plenty of options that will suit your hearing loss and lifestyle needs. The manufacturers we work with are always developing new technology, and we've seen some fantastic improvements even in just the last few years. Like so many businesses, at the start of the pandemic, we were unfortunately forced to close our doors. However, since June, as an essential service, we are able to remain open with lots of strict COVID safety measures in place. Our safety measures include a locked door policy, high quality PPE, additional cleaning processes and symptom checks. All of our staff have also received our first vaccinations, ensuring that you've got the safest possible environment to access hearing care.
So hopefully that's given you a flavour of the practice itself. I work for one of those hearing aid manufacturers that Oliver mentioned. So my name is Sue Falkingham. I'm an audiologist with about 30 years of experience. I know I don't look it, but I do have a real interest in helping people to understand the connection with better hearing and better health. And we've learned a lot over the last 30 years about those connections. And I'm sure it will be quite a surprise to some of you on this call that so many of these diseases and conditions can have an effect on our hearing, or we know that people who have a hearing loss can have more risk of some of these particular conditions as well. So getting our hearing checked and making it part of our everyday and regular healthcare appointments is something that's really important throughout our lifespan. So if you've got a friend or a family member that's never had their hearing checked, then it really is something you should ask them about, and ask them yourselves about them getting a routine check. We shouldn't just leave it until we feel there's a problem with our hearing, because it can be the first sign for some of these diseases in particular. So we know that if we detect a low frequency hearing loss, for example, this might put people at more risk of a cardiovascular event, so some sort of heart attack or stroke. And we know that we should check these things and ask people to go to their GP. We know that people with things like hypertension, where their blood pressure is high, can accelerate hearing loss in those individuals. And we also know that people with diabetes are much more likely to have hearing loss than people without diabetes there as well. So lots of conditions that we're able to now show with lots of research are connected to our hearing health and better hearing health. But we also see a lot of headlines, and we've seen quite a few over the last few months, haven't we? I'm sure some of you have seen headlines in the newspapers about being able to tackle some of our worries around cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's by improving our hearing. We know that the ears act as the gateway to the computer that is our brain, and that computer needs input. And it needs conversation, it needs interaction. And we know that by improving our hearing and keeping our hearing status good throughout our lives, we can improve our ability to take information in. And actually, we are starting to be able to see a real change in people's cognitive ability as they get older, associated with good hearing and with using hearing instruments. We always want to encourage people to use hearing aids, but a couple of things that have become much more prevalent over the last 12 months have been around isolation and loneliness. Isolation and loneliness have become very hot topics around the pandemic. And of course, it's something that our government have been working really hard on through the pandemic to get information out to people about ways that they might tackle the isolation that social distancing and lockdowns have caused. So I wanted to talk a little bit about loneliness today. I don't want this to be a depressing conversation because we are starting to come out at the other end. But of course, loneliness isn't new, and loneliness has been linked quite strongly with hearing loss. This is a research centre in the US, and it's called Johns Hopkins. The researcher is Frank Lin. He's a very well-known researcher with older people, but also around cognitive health and our brain function. And he talks about hearing loss being linked to loneliness, because what we lose when we lose our hearing is that ability to communicate. We lose that ability to freely communicate and not have to think about the conversation. And obviously getting a hearing instrument can really help us there, but it isn't a replacement for your actual ears. So there is always the worry that our communication suffers if we're not hearing well. What we tend to find is that people wait a long time to come forwards and talk to us about their hearing. So as a profession, it can be between 7 and 10 years but after somebody first notices their hearing loss that they actually turn up at our door. And we do lots of things to try and encourage people to come and get their hearing checked throughout life, but it isn't like our eyes and our teeth where we are sort of taught at school to get those regular checks. So by the time we see people, they've often started to just walk away a little bit from some of their social situations. So they might go to the pub a bit less often. They might have found themselves leaving groups because they've decided that they weren't getting much out of them because they couldn't hear as well as they should. They might even have been a little embarrassed in some circumstances because they didn't hear properly. So we do find that that communication loss leads to social isolation. And we know in both the hearing loss population, but also people generally, that the more isolated we are, the higher the risk of depression and of depressive illness being identified. And of course, that then leads to loneliness. And loneliness is in that cycle with our hearing loss, but also with that social isolation. There's a real neurobiology of why loneliness is such a health crisis. And this is really interesting reading. What we find is that the neurobiology relates to our fight or flight mechanism. So I'm sure lots of you have heard about fight or flight. This is the stuff that kept us safe when we were living in much more dangerous times. So if a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger was coming to get the caveman, then his body would get him ready to attack or to run away. And that whole system is around our sympathetic nervous system and the release of a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol does all sorts of interesting things in our body. So for instance, it makes our blood stickier and more likely to clot. That's fabulous when you've got a tiger coming at you, because if he scratches you, you want your blood to clot really fast, and you want it to be stickier so that you don't bleed heavily. It's cortisol will also increase the amount of glucose in our body, so that we have more energy to run away or to fight. All fabulous things back then. Unfortunately, if the threat doesn't go away, the cortisol continues to act around the body. So we don't release the hormone that gets rid of the cortisol. And loneliness is perceived by our body as a threat. And that constant threat leads to a constant level of cortisol that's increased, and that can lead to a number of other conditions that we're looking at in the previous slides. So for instance, the stroke and heart disease is around that extra clotting factor and the stickier blood. The diabetes is around having extra glucose in the body, getting ready to fight or to flight. So you can see that loneliness can feed into some very physical as well as mental states of health. And the UK have been tackling loneliness for quite a long time now. So pre-pandemic, we were the only country in the world with a Minister for Loneliness. And this is Baroness Barron, who is the current Minister for Loneliness. And it was identified as a health crisis in this country. And it was built, a lot of strategy was built after the Jo Cox incident where the MP was killed. There was a lot of government strategy because this was one of her things. It was a thing of hers about we've got more that joins us together than that divides us. And she was very much a champion of looking at loneliness as a social crisis. So there's been a policy there for a number of years, and GPs are encouraged to have conversations and something called social prescribing, which allows GPs, rather than prescribing antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications, to actually define loneliness as something that needs activity and companionship. And they can actually prescribe things like joining clubs, gym memberships, things like that. And social prescribing is a really helpful and cost-effective way of improving people's health, both physically and mentally, because we're reducing their loneliness. There's been a campaign through the pandemic that is Let's Talk Loneliness, and you've seen a lot from celebrities, but also particularly the royal family getting involved in this one, where they've been doing phone calls around people who have been asked to shield. They've been talking to people who have been isolated, and they've also been talking to family groups and to people who are trying to help people who are isolated to build that community spirit that we needed to get us through those long periods of isolation and lockdown. But remember that we all have a little part to play, don't we? And I'm sure some of you have volunteered on some of the local community projects and have perhaps volunteered to be a befriender virtually as well. So if you have experienced loneliness and you want to talk to somebody, then there are lots of government resources on that Let's Talk Loneliness helpline. And as I say, I hope that I've tied those two things together in terms of hearing as well, and how important it is for us to have those conversations about our hearing so that we don't ever get into the position where we start to isolate ourselves. So why do we think that you will hear, you'll age better if you have better hearing? Well, there are 4 ways. The first one is that sociable aspect. So we've talked about how important it is to be engaged. I, for one, am really excited about the last week or so where we've been able to actually see family and friends and travel again a little bit. And it's absolutely vital to everybody's well-being, but also obviously when you get there you want to be engaged and you want to maintain those connections. And research shows that people who enjoy social relationships are more likely to live longer. For those of you that have got online happily today, I'm going to direct you to a TED talk, and you'll find it TED.com. And if you put in the Harvard longevity study, you'll find a fabulous 20-minute video about this. They looked at a group of, it started off with them being young men who were new students at Harvard in about the 1920s. And they have followed them throughout their life. And they've now got gentlemen in their 80s, and they've also added women to the mix as Harvard took in women, but they have just continued to follow them and follow them. And what you'll find from that Harvard study is that those with really good social connections, so friends, family, relationships, have actually lived longer than those without those relationships. So it's really interesting to listen to them talk about that particular research. You don't get many research studies that have been going on for that length of time. So Hearing your best also keeps you alert and in control. It's a really important thing around our confidence, isn't it? And I'm sure those of you that have been fitted with hearing instruments will know that the improvement in just being able to be connected to your world around you, things like hearing the bird song, understanding when somebody says, oh, can you hear that? And you think, oh, yeah, right, such and such. Just that ability to stay connected is really important. But we actually do know that people are less likely to get accidental injuries and less likely to fall if they have good hearing. And then there's the mentally sharp. So we're encouraged, aren't we, to keep our brain active, to do crosswords, to do Sudoku. I'm absolutely hopeless at Sudoku. I don't know about the rest of you. But gamification and getting involved in all of these things and keeping our brain active doing those brain training games has been positively encouraged. But we've got to make sure that we also get the signal in from our ears to our brain. And there was a Lancet Commission study that looked at this particular aspect of what are the things we can do to reduce our risk of cognitive decline, because it's not one thing. So dementia is actually a really interesting statement, and cognitive decline is really interesting because lots of different little factors are changing to improve our general mental health. So things like an improvement in diet over the last 20 and 30 years for the general population, as well as our belief that we should now do physical exercise, are actually reducing people's risk of dementia as well as improving their physical health. So the Lancet report looked at all sorts of different little things we can do to improve and to reduce our risk of developing cognitive problems in later life. And many of them start right from when we become adults. So again, something that shows that hearing loss in midlife, so in our 40s and 50s, is a real risk factor for that cognitive decline. Untreated hearing loss, I might add. And of course, the one thing we all want is to be able to connect, to be engaged, and to enjoy the world around us. So we do believe that hearing your best will bring real benefits to you in your general everyday life, and positive outlook as well. So our motto at Starkey has always been hear better, live better. And we truly believe that that is one of the things that you can do for yourself. And I want to encourage you to do this for your friends and family too, which is to keep a check on your hearing throughout life and to keep going forwards and getting tested. So I want to bring it back to today, and I want to talk a little bit about face mask. And I'm sure I can hear some of you groaning from here. Face masks are going to be part of our life, depending on who you listen to, probably for the whole of this year. And in face masks, we get lots of different problems, particularly when we have a hearing loss. But it's also brought a lot of people forwards that didn't think they had a hearing loss before, because the loss of sound is very much in the speech frequencies. So yes, we lose our visual clues, but with the distance and the background noise in between us and the speaker, as well as the face mask being used, we are seeing a lot more people coming forwards with problems. But of course, one of the other problems if you've got a hearing aid is that it can be difficult to wear your face mask, can't it? And I know me and my mum have these conversations every time we go out. My mum wears a behind the ear hearing aid, and I'm always having to check for her that it's still in. So there are a few tips on our website that will talk to you about the different ways to wear a mask. Changing the type of mask that you're wearing. So wearing it round the back of your head rather than over your ears. Using the ear savers, which are essentially just little pieces of ribbon, or you can actually crochet them, or you can buy pieces of plastic that connect to the back of the mask. And you can see some examples here. I'm not sure many of us want to wear the baseball cap, but there are people that have put little buttons onto the edge of their glasses. But you can see that by removing them from the ears, we have less chance of knocking hearing aids off when we take them on or off. And these are just a couple of examples of those mask extenders that you can buy. They're relatively cheap in the plastic, but many of us don't want to be using that single-use plastic anymore. So you can also use the patterns that you can find on the website just to make yourself an ear saver, as they're called. Many of you have new hearing aids, and if you're connected to your app, we can use the location services on your app to help you to make sure you don't lose your hearing aids entirely. So most of the apps from the different manufacturers have something called Find My Hearing Aids. And if you do lose your hearing aids when you take your mask off, then this will tell you where you were last connected to them, so you know where to go and look. If you haven't ever used that feature, then it's best to get it set up before you need it. It can't find them if it was never connected. So do ask one of the staff at the hearing centres whether your hearing aids have this facility, and ask them to show you how to work it and how to set it up with your hearing aids. And I just wanted to offer some communication tips as well. So it is important that we reduce noise, and we ask people to obtain your attention. That sounds like a big thing to do, but actually if you've got a partner, or like me and my mum, if somebody's talking to my mum, I'll say, "Mum, John's talking about her holiday. Oh, I wish." But you can cue people in without making it really obvious there. Asking people if they could remove their mask if they move further away, so that you can see their faces if you know that you rely on expression. So there is an exemption for people talking to someone with a hearing loss, but if you can maintain the social distance as well, then that's great. Do tell people that you're struggling, and ask them to write down any important points, maybe like dates and times. Those are always handy to have written down anyway. You can also think about something called a remote microphone, that if you're in a situation a lot where somebody's wearing a mask, you can ask them just to pop the remote microphone onto their clothing, and then the signal will stream straight into your ears. Remember to rephrase and get people to think about the way that they're saying something, rather than just repeating the same phrase. It's a little bit like Alexa, if any of you are using that. If Alexa doesn't understand you, you don't tend to just repeat the same thing. You move the words around a little bit, and she'll get the context of what's been said. So when we generally say, "Sorry, I didn't hear that," people don't generally repeat the same thing. They'll change the words around, and they'll make it a little bit easier to hear. And finally, you can also get apps, if you have a smartphone, that will let you transcribe and use subtitles for live speech. And there's just a couple of examples there. So just a little bit on how hearing aids work. Essentially, hearing aids in themselves are quite a simple device. There's a microphone that picks up the sound, and from your perspective, if you're a hearing aid wearer, then giving that a little brush and keeping it clean is a really good idea, so that the sound can get through nicely. That microphone then takes the signal into a chip in a digital hearing aid, and we apply lots of different computer algorithms to the sound to work out what it is and what we should do about it. So is it speech? Is it speech from somebody close to you? Is there other noise involved in this that we need to reduce? And the algorithms within the chip will then give they also have your hearing testing, and they will give the sound back out into your ear through a receiver or a speaker, and that will be tuned to your particular hearing needs and your particular hearing loss. So we can do a lot of manipulation of the sound in a very small chip. One thing I like to tell people is that the chips and the computer power in your hearing aid is more advanced than the rocket that got to the moon in the 60s, but in such a small space. Lots of different styles of hearing aids, so over the ear and custom products, so ones that actually fit in your ear with nothing behind your ear. They're really popular at the moment because of mask wearing. We're seeing more people interested in ones that go in your ear. And you can see those in somebody's ear. So you can see that this is actually a rechargeable custom. So it's the same great technology that you might already have with your rechargeable batteries in your behind the ear, but you can now get that in a custom style too. And when we're able to do things then with the hearing aid, so we can give you personalized fine tuning, where you can actually double tap the hearing aid and get it to tune for the particular situation that you're in that particular moment. We've got advanced noise reduction that lets you go anywhere and hopefully seamlessly hear without you having to do anything to your hearing instruments. That algorithm and that chip will set everything up for you. We hope that hearing aids don't whistle or buzz anymore. There are lots of sophisticated systems within them that try to avoid that. Just remember, if you are getting buzzing or whistling from your hearing aid when it's in, it's definitely time to book an appointment at the hearing centre, because that shouldn't be happening and we should be able to fix that. And then we always have a conversation with people around whether music is important to them. It becomes important to some people more than others, but there are things we can now do with our hearing aids to help people who really love music, playing, singing, going to gigs, going to concerts. We can change the way that the sound is processed to give you some of that joy, not just that really functional speech signal. I talked a little bit about rechargeable. So most rechargeable hearing aids now will deliver a full day's use on a single charge. The chargers themselves get plugged in regularly, but they also have onboard batteries in some of the products. So you can actually use those without plugging them in if you may be going away for the weekend, for example. That smartphone connectivity I've mentioned a couple of times, but actually for some people now with their hearing aids, they can stream all their phone calls into their hearing aids. They can use it as headphones if they want to listen to music or audio, podcasts. They can use it as a remote control to control their hearing aids as well. So lots of reasons why, if you are getting into using a smartphone now, it's definitely worth thinking about how your hearing aids might connect to that for you. And then on our particular products, we also have some healthable features. And these allow you to track your body health and your brain health. So a little bit like a Fitbit for your body. It'll track your steps and your stand and your movement through the day. And your brain health. Do you remember I talked about gamification and brain training? This basically tracks how well you're doing at engaging and keeping active with your brain score as well. And we also have some products where we can detect if you fall and send an emergency alert to some of your contacts. So up to 3 contacts that you select would get a text message saying Sue has fallen over, and they can quickly get you help or come and help you if you do have a fall at all. We have some nice features in terms of an intelligent assistant where it will act a little bit like Alexa. So you can ask it what time the bus is and do you need to take your umbrella? But it will also do things like turn your hearing aid up and down just with your voice. On some of the products, we can translate different languages. So we can use our phone and the internet and we can have a conversation with somebody who's speaking Spanish, and it will speak English into our ears, for example. 27 languages on the iPhone, and I think it's about 34 now on an Android phone for that. So some great little features that come from those very top of the range advanced hearing aids that hopefully make these more of a want to have device rather than a need to have. I like reminders. I can tell my hearing aids to say anything to me. So my reminders might be that I need to take my mum for her second COVID jab at the weekend. So I have a reminder in my hearing aids, and it will actually speak mum's jab 10 o'clock and remind me, and I can set whatever time I want it to say. But you could also use it for taking medication. So I might set one up that says, don't forget to take the lunchtime tablet that comes at 12 o'clock every day. So reminders are a really nice feature you can now get into those hearing aids. And then the other one that I quite like, having somebody who has a hearing loss. My mum is 80 and lives alone, and I have an ability to look at my phone using a different app and make sure that she's put her hearing aids in this morning. I can look at whether she's taken any steps and done any exercise this morning as well. It's a little bit like spying, but it's used to nudge and to encourage her to stay active, but also to nudge me so that if I see that mum hasn't been active today, I can ring her later and see if she wants to go somewhere or if anything's happened that meant she wasn't active today. So it's a really nice addition to hearing care now. So that's me finished. I'm going to bring Oliver back in, and we do have a question, Oliver, for you. If anybody else has got any questions, please feel free to type them into the box for us. So Oliver, this lady has Widex hearing aids and they're charged every night. Charger just stays plugged in all the time, but just wondering if it retains charge for a while at all, and could it be taken somewhere else for emergency recharging?
The Widex one does not. No, there's a handful of manufacturers. Your products, there's a handful of manufacturers where they do store a charge. The Widex product doesn't. No.
Okay, do we have any other questions? You can type them into the chat box, which should be just on your screen at the top. So just while we're waiting for any questions there, just to say thank you to Oliver for inviting us to join you on this webinar. As you can see, all of the details for contacting all of the practices are here. Do we support children as well as adults?
We don't. From experience, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Sue, but NHS paediatrics tend to work really well. And I think generally, that the level of care that you get from NHS paediatrics does seem to be a step up on what it can be for adult provision. So for the most part, I think NHS paediatric audiology works really well. So we would normally recommend those routes. There are private specialists that you can go to, but that's not something we specialise in.
I agree. I think paediatrics is very different, and the skill set's very different. So I always think if you can prompt your local audiology department, that's always the better way. But you'd never see anybody with a faulty hearing aid if you could do a basic repair. So if you are having a problem with a child's hearing aid, we would recommend you try and get back to their audiology department. What hearing tests do you do after fitting a hearing aid?
Hi, Brent. It's nice to see you. Not seen you for a while. We can do a number of different tests after a hearing aid has been fitted. There's a sort of in situ tests that can be run for us to ensure that we're getting the right gain responses and the right frequency responses. From my perspective, those tests tend to be quite clinical. And I don't think there's any substitute from feedback from patients. So one thing that we're always really keen on is making sure that aftercare process that someone's getting is as in depth as it can possibly be. So calling people back into the clinic every couple of weeks for the first 2 or 3 months following a fit-in, for me, is the best way to diagnose how well a product is working, because if there's anything that's not quite right, then by having that face-to-face discussion, that gives you the best possible ability to have those adjustments made. And sometimes the more clinical tests are great for proving what we've done, but actually the feedback that a flesh and blood person gives us is a lot more beneficial in helping us to make sure that the sound quality is right for you.
And I've got a kind of follow-up from somebody else, which is how often should you have a routine hearing checkup?
Yeah, that's a good one. So we, by default, would make sure that we retest yearly. You'll get a letter from us once a year suggesting that you come in for a retest. Yearly retests are the best way to go. You quite often would find year on year that there's not a huge change, but there are those people where there can be a significant change after 12 months. So we would always try and see you at least once a year for a retest. And we would normally see people every 6 months for ear health checks, otoscopies, preventative wax removals, and service checks as well. So it is an ongoing relationship that we're building with our clients, and it needs that to make sure that you're getting the most out of your hearing.
And just a question about, is it the top of the range devices that do reminders and step counts? Not necessarily. So there are some different technology tiers that do different feature sets. So the fall detection is on the very top of the range, but some of the step counts and brain scores and reminders come lower down the range as well. So the centre staff will be really happy to talk to you about the different options there as well. Question about battery there. My battery lasts 14 hours only. So any way I can get it to last longer?
Hi, Christine. I've never met you, but I've had a couple of emails, and I know Debbie looks after you in Colchester and Vicky before. You might be able to help on this, Sue. Christine has got cross systems, the Starkey cross system that's rechargeable. I think the reason why you only get 14 hours is that cross technology is very power hungry.
Yeah. It's constantly looking for the other hearing aid. It sucks a lot of life
out of the battery, doesn't it? So, yeah. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Sue, but if there were perhaps periods throughout the day where the cross device could be put on charge.
Mm-hmm. So we do have a little turbocharger, and the turbocharger will give you a really fast charge if it's less than 20% battery life, and that is credit card sized. So it's quite a small device to carry in your handbag, and you could just pop it on for 15 minutes and get a good couple of hours from it that way, and get extra time that way. So I don't know if you've already got that, Christine, but if not, then do get in touch, because that's definitely something that we recommend with the cross system. It is a bit of a nuisance, but it is just because it's always constantly saying to the other side, where are you? Do you have any information? And constantly asking it. So yeah, they are just power hungry.
And I think that's a little bit like mobile phone batteries, because if you turn your top of the range smartphone on every morning, but don't connect it to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything else, then your mobile phone battery will last you a couple of days. But as soon as you're connecting it to Wi-Fi or anything with Bluetooth, I don't get 12 hours out of a battery without recharging it. And I think it's that data drain is what causes the problem. Yeah. Christine has written us a very lovely testimonial, so I will get you a turbocharger ordered and sent out as soon as possible, Christine, and then that might kind of help to get you through a slightly longer day.
Yeah, because it is credit card size, a little bit thicker, but I pop them. My boss wears hearing aids, and I pop them in every pocket he has, so that if he forgets his charger, he's got his charger overnight. So yeah. Okay, that looks to be all our questions there. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the session, and we will make it live for you in lots of different ways.